director of Vancouver Island School of Art. And this is our slide room gallery. Some people might remember when we have the striped building, we have the space in the basement or the lower level. So we haven't really been able to have the gallery for a couple of years, but now we have it in the space. So we're very excited to have Jeremy's paintings. They look so fantastic in the space and in the light. So, and I know some of you know Jeremy. He's an artist born and bred in BC, taught at Visa. He specializes in plein air painting houses. And he also taught in Dawson City for 2 years. So I think, I don't know if you have any Dawson City related work here.
No.
So, anyways, we're very excited. Welcome, Jeremy.
I wrote down some notes and then forgot them at home, so I scribbled them down. But I'm not going to read on the paper. I just wanted to say thank you to Wendy for inviting me to bring my work in here. It does look really nice, the lights are really nice. And that's really great to see them here. And thank you all for coming because it's a beautiful day. I would personally, like if there was a thing like this, I wouldn't be here. I'd be outside somewhere. So that's really kind of you, John. Thank you. And then the other thing I wanted to say, because you know when people come and speak, they want to do this land acknowledgement. Well, I do too, but you know often it just sounds kind of like lip service or something like that. But as a landscaper, it's just, for me it has a different meaning because you know studying landscape it's not just about making pictures, right? You start thinking about like the politics of land and human legacies in land and all that kind of stuff. And so right away, when we start thinking more deeply about landscape, we think about the people and the human legacy there. And so here, where the Lekwungen speaking people were, the Songhees and the Esquimalt people, they have this relationship with this place that goes back thousands of years. And it's this rapport with the place. And so I would just want to acknowledge that relationship that's there, this ancient relationship that's there. What else did I say about that? Oh, because landscape is about nature, right, and culture. And if they're not like one singular thing, then they've got to be somehow, like they're very much inextricably linked. So when all of my landscape paintings are not really, they're about place, but they're about people. They're about us. So that's another reason why I want to make that acknowledgement and how, and acknowledge the importance of those relationships, because landscape painters have a relationship to place too, right? Anyways, blah, blah, blah. So here we have a selection of paintings that's from the past 3 or 4 years. And some explore the human interface with nature and how humans and nature coalesce and define each other. And some are plein air paintings and engage with light and color. And some are made in the studio and some are made outside. But what I wanted to talk about, just really like this will only take another like 2 minutes. But what I wanted to say is that all these are like an attempt, they're like bouncing around this attempt to reconcile this handful of things. And those are the distinction of oneness of humans and nature, the distinction of like either the oneness, like either the distinction or the oneness that humans have with nature. So I like trying to go back and forth with that. And then they're trying to reconcile the act of painting from life versus painting in the studio, like outside in the landscape or in the studio. Because these paintings are a combination of those things. Another thing I'm trying to reconcile is the project of painting a mutable thing or a picture. Because to paint something that's, and there's examples in here like the plum tree painting is like looking at the plum tree for several days from daytime into nighttime. So then the picture starts to fall apart and stuff like that. So what am I making? Am I making a picture or am I trying to trying to show you how this thing shimmers and changes if you look at it for a long time. And then there's and all of these are seemingly conflicting priorities. And there's one other thing too, and that is to reconcile, the other thing that I'm trying to reconcile is what do the paintings serve? So some artists, their work serves art. They make art about art. They're sort of engaged in the dialectic of art making, like the modernist project, like one artist makes this, another artist responds, and it's a conversation, an ongoing conversation about mark making or about concept or responding to other people's work and sort of engaging in this sort of larger conversation. The art is about art. And for some other artists, the art is about, it serves something else. It serves, say, like maybe historically speaking, it would be like the aristocracy or the church. And then in today's context, maybe it's environment or identity politics or social concerns, right? And some artists work with somehow in between. So I'm also trying to reconcile those things. So wanting to make art that sort of engages with art makers and art making and pushes it a little bit, and maybe takes something like an old idea like plein air painting and bring it to relevance in today's context. Like how can I make that relevant today? While also serving the ideas that I've talked about before, like the problem of humans and not the problem, but trying to reconcile human and non-human space, human and non-human experience in one painting, all those things. So basically what I'm trying to say is that I've been working on reconciling these vagaries through persistent doubt, constant recurring doubt for about 30 years. And I'm still, and I feel like I'm just starting to realize that it's not going to get reconciled. And but I can only ever sort of work towards it, but it'll never actually be. I guess that's why I keep painting, because I keep trying to reconcile all these things, and it's just impossible. So that's all I have to say about the work, except for the fact that some of them are outdoor paintings, some of them are studio paintings. You can probably tell the difference.
So and Jeremy, when you say studio paintings, you start them outdoor, or you do them
just start, finish in the studio?
And you're working from photographic references?
Bunch of photographs. Usually I'll take a whole bunch, and then I sort of put them all together in one. Like I'll maybe start a painting, and it's like I'll use some daytime photographs and some afternoon and then evening photographs and put them together in a painting.
I don't think it's easy to tell.
Really?
Because I thought they were all plein air. Because of like the buried light and things. Like they look very alive. And I wonder if it's because of you have such a long history of making plein air paintings, and then you're saying you're using photographs at different times of day, so you're almost taking that plein air tradition and bringing it into the studio by using different. It's like not just one photograph.
Yeah.
And so I think that's what makes them look alive. So I didn't know that.
Oh, okay. Okay. Yeah, adding those different times of day and stuff like that, just trying to put them together.
Yeah.
These little ones here those ones, well, the one on the far right, that one's like pretty straight up, just one time of day. But the two on the left, they're in the type of day and night. Because it was winter, so I didn't want to stand outside, and winter was -20 or something like that.
This one also looks like different times of day.
Yeah.
So is that a studio or?
Yeah, it's a studio.
So.
There's usually a lot more like thinking going on the canvas from the outside paintings. Like it's funny because all these mistakes, right? Like, no, that's not it. That's not it. That's not it. Oh, that'll work. That'll work. And then because I constantly like revising it, because not only do I not know what to do right away, but then it's different in 5 minutes.
And is this one of the ones you did at Fairy Creek?
No, this one was at Francis King Park.
Okay.
Yeah.
And you brought the canvas.
Yes. Hauled it up there every day, and it was in December. So I only had like in the forest canopy. It was only really, and I'm not an early riser, so I'd get there at around 10 or 11, and start working, and only be able to work till about 4. Because then by that time, there's not much light in there and it seems dark in the forest. And then I would follow the painting out into the opening and see it in the light. But yeah, it was 2 weeks going back and forth with that.
And then did you work on it in the studio?
No. I talked to Zane, you came and we talked about this because there was this thing that I noticed in the studio that this tree here, it's in the foreground, but it kind of flips background, foreground, background, foreground. And I was like, well, that's stupid. I need to bring this forward. So I thought maybe I'll just subdue these greens here to make them less saturated and maybe less contrast, and then that'll allow this tree to come forward, using atmospheric perspective tricks. And then I thought, and then I talked to a friend of mine about it, and he said, well, why would you do that? Because that's what being in the forest actually is kind of like. Right? Because especially over time, it's all dappled and all the, like a lot of the things that sort of make a picture make sense. If you look outside for a long time, they don't make sense anymore. They fall apart. So I was like, okay, so this is like a tapestry of attention. It's just all over, it's all on the surface, and that's something that you talked about.
Yeah, because the eye goes in and out and it focuses on different things.
Yeah.
And it doesn't do what a photograph does, right? It's much more exploring in and out.
Yeah. And it just becomes all over.
Yeah.
All over.
It becomes an experience for the viewer because they're seeing how you saw things at a certain time, unclear, more detail, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
it's a positive thing, I would say.
Yeah, it's a thing. It's
a recording.
Yeah, it's what happens when you're actually standing there painting rather
Yeah.
than trying to construct something in the studio. Yeah.
And I love when you go close, I make everyone look at these just from about like 6 inches.
Yeah.
Because everything melts and it's just paint. It's just about painting.
Yeah, it falls apart.
Yeah, and I really appreciate that I could work on those 2 levels, like, representation, but it's also very abstract.
There's also some sticks in there, some pieces of seed. And there are bugs in there, there's usually bugs
Yeah.
in the plein air paintings.
Well, does anyone else talk about
I'm just interested in when you sit down to do a plein air painting, that in the conventional way, you do it over a couple of hours and you're trying to get it all recorded down before everything changes, and then all of a sudden it's 11:30 a.m. and all the lighting changes and you're like, done. And so you're trying to keep an image in your head that you saw at 8 a.m. and that image is gone and you're starting to lose it in your painting, and it's this incredibly frustrating 2 to 3 hours that you spend with that's incredibly challenging, but it seems like you embrace time and just keep painting what you see in the moment. Is that?
Yeah, I had that experience years ago. I was in Calgary and I thought I'm going to do a painting of this alley, and it was just a small painting, and so it was in the afternoon, or it started maybe at 10 in the morning, and then I was finished around 4 or something like that. And looking this way, and when I finished the painting, the shadows were like sort of like this boom, 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 down the alley. I was like, I'm an idiot. They should all be in the same direction, right? Because that would make sense. And then I immediately was like, well, why would I do that? Because this is what happens this is the duration that's showing. It shows that I was actually here for that duration.
It's time-lapse painting.
Yeah. Yeah. So then I realized that. So I just tried to make a hello, welcome. Then I realized that that's what I wanted to do in painting outside, was there's a pictorial structure, so we can have a kind of like a sort of an armature, and then just try to paint. And it does kind of fall apart. And does anybody remember that Japanese photographer who would like take pictures of like prolonged exposures of like a cinema, and then the cinema screen is white, or the ocean, and it just all becomes white? So it's just like, except you see the perimeter of the cinema and the seating and stuff like that, but then the screen itself is overexposed.
Yeah.
So I was really interested in that. So like what happens, and I maybe a little bit, but I haven't gone there quite yet. Maybe I'm not ready or something to like keep painting until everything completely falls apart. But I don't know, I think that takes a bit more courage than I have at this time. Because I'm still kind of stuck with the idea of an image. or a picture. Hi.
You're talking about irreconcilable differences within your work. Lots of different examples from culture to formal disparities. And you're talking about 30 years in, you're still thinking, it's irreconcilable. And I just wondered if there was this ideal place that you could ever land at where you did resolve. Let's say you found resolution. Do you think that would be boring and that it's that irreconcilable element that sort of pulls you forward and creates this tension in your work? So it's more a comment, but also maybe just an idea that you could riff off of.
Well, it feels. Is this Sarah?
It is Sarah.
Hi, Sarah.
Sarah Robichaud is here, everyone.
Hi, Sarah.
Came down just for this talk.
No.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah, and I have an injury, so I'm standing up.
Okay.
Not to be rude.
That makes two of us. Three of us. Yeah, I don't know. Like, I don't think it could be really reconciled. I don't think so. But at the same time, I also I keep confronting my own I feel like I chicken out a little bit, or I go safe for a year or two, and whoa, why haven't I done this? Why didn't I take the opportunity that I had to really push through and push forward and see what happens? Because I know it's not gonna. There's no okay, done. I've been there, and it's not really ever really done. We just painters. We just keep painting. It doesn't get any easier. We just keep painting, right? So.
Is there an example of something that you went, aha, and then you decided not to go?
Oh yeah, tons.
Realized.
Tons. I go, whoop, yeah. And honestly, there's also this. I'm also gauging how other people perceive my work. I'm not on an island just doing this for my own sake, right? So, I just did this project of painting in the forest out in Port Renfrew. And a lot of people were really interested in that. So now I'm okay, well that's what I'm supposed to do. I'm supposed to make these big documentary paintings of trees. But I don't have the van anymore. How am I going to get a roof box for my car and stuff like that? But then all the things that sort of compelled me to do that, those things went away. Thinking that I would make a difference, and I didn't. Thinking that I was part of this interesting cause that fractured and became really toxic and weird. Distanced myself from that.
Is that are you referring to a Fairy Creek?
Yeah, the Fairy Creek
I was
block.
wondering how did you see your role as a artist activist? Because I know you did painting at Fairy Creek and also Tent City.
Yeah.
Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Well, there's another sort of conflict there, right? So wanting to do this work in service of something, oh no, I'll be the painter. Painting doesn't have to be this solitary, hermetic kind of thing. Historically, it actually was very social. People would make paintings as a proposal. I guess they still are, but they were the sort of nexus of discussion and debate and stuff like that. But so I thought, maybe it would be useful that way. I always want it to be useful, right? Because as you know, I have a studio full of paintings. I get tons of paintings. What am I going to do with them? How are they useful? What are they doing for anything? So, in this case, in these not so much activist. I didn't think of it as activism. I thought of it as advocacy.
Right.
Right. So when I was painting these trees, I was advocating for these trees. I was this is a portrait. This is a living thing.
And drawing attention to place in a different way. Yeah.
Yeah. And also thinking, feeling that if I spend, 2 weeks looking hard at painting what I see, and I bring that painting into town, then people who don't get to go out there are going to look at this painting and they're going to have they're going to see kind of see what it looks like to have looked at something for so long, to have had that conversation. It's kind of like a conversation, like a rapport that happens, right? This painting here, when you're looking at this, it's 2 weeks of standing in the forest looking, and that's what you get to see all at once. So that's kind of the hope was that would work, that would help or do something. And I even brought the paintings out in front of the legislature on easels.
Oh, really?
Yeah, 3 paintings. And I had a musician friend of mine play her nickel harpa. We called it a requiem for the ancient forests. And then I brought it to a couple of the protests. I brought a painting out, put it on an easel.
Why don't you say that's a failure? It doesn't sound like a failure.
Well, it's not a failure, but it was a detour. Because before that, I was doing these paintings of the studio-based paintings of a tree with somebody living underneath it, or lights through trees, and some of these sort of more urban things. And thinking about that, and then also outside working on these like really sort of dense ones, like this plum tree painting over here. Let's grab it. Because this painting, like this is like the concurrent project, so that's why it all seems so like kind of conflicting or something like that, or not conflicting, but like. So when Wendy was like, "Oh, you can come and do a talk or something like that," I was like, "Well, what am I going to say, right?" But I did want to talk to you about my doubt and not knowing what the hell I'm doing. Still.
Fantastic. All painting is an experiment. You never know exactly what you're doing.
Right.
And you're using the word reconcile. Is that the same as resolve? Is that the same thing?
I don't know.
Because I used to tell, when I was an old person, when I was a younger person, in my painting classes, people used to say, oh, this isn't resolved or that isn't resolved. And I used to say, if you resolve everything in a painting, it's dead. There's no more questions left.
Yeah.
And that painting is that real struggle to attempt to do something. It doesn't say that it's going to solve the universe. It's attempting, and the attempt is really beautiful, and it's evident in these paintings. So it doesn't have to have that final conclusion. It's the record of all your searching.
Yeah.
How am I doing?
It kind of like. Okay, so here I'll work towards like, what happens if I keep painting day to night. Okay, what happens if well, that's kind of the same. But then what happens what happens if I take this canvas to a tent city and then talk to people, like those are different projects. These are different.
I'd say it's brave doing all those different things at once. They're all the same thing. They're all you.
I always keep thinking like maybe it's somehow that it would just sort of make sense altogether.
It does. It does make sense with its questions.
And with no detours, there's no movement, I think.
Right. Sure.
Yeah. So.
When Sarah was talking, the thought that came to my mind when I heard the word irreconcilable, I think when we have, especially in a world that's so politically and culturally polarized, we're really conscious of the lack of conciliation, lack of reconciliation. But when, as she was talking, I saw you as the reconciliation. Like, you're the one who holds these disparate ideas together in your mind, and you are acting upon them through the act of painting. So the reconciliation is actually happening within you, and the paintings are the witness to that. And I think the idea of bearing witness, you were talking about painting, our culture has lost the ability to gaze. Our vision has been retrained to be very fleeting, and you're bearing witness to the forest by spending 2 weeks, 3 weeks, or whatever in the studio, is bearing witness in a way that I venture to say it's almost a spiritual act. It's almost an act of antidote or mending.
I agree. It's kind of a bit of an antidote for me, because I get caught up in the speediness of the world, and I was thinking about like, hang on, this is my brain, this is my attention. I'm going to spend it where I want, right? So it feels like it feels a little bit rebellious to like go up to the woods or just look at something for a few days or a week or something like that. It feels a little bit radical when we got this stuff on imagery going like this, and then I'm like, no, okay, I'm gonna put my attention here. Because I've talked to some of you about this, like in classes, talking about how our attention is like one of the world's most valuable things right now, right? Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, all that, YouTube, there's just all wants your attention because they're gonna sell it. And these companies are worth billions, trillions, because, and they're just, their material, their product is your attention, right? So it feels like kind of like asserting the sovereignty of your own attention seems like kind of like an important thing to do.
Well, remembering that your life is attention. I mean, bringing the attention home.
Yeah, that's all you've got, right?
Yeah, that's it.
That's all you get.
Yeah. It's just a pile up of attention.
Yeah.
I'm a little curious. I see you've done a number of trees that spread out in the dendritic pattern and all that sort of thing over thing. Have you ever tried doing a Gary Oak over something and deal with the incongruity that the Gary Oak produces?
Painted several Gary Oaks.
And how has it gone?
They're impossible. They're impossible to paint. I've done quite a few paintings of Gary Oaks, I would say. And they are impossible. It's great. It's great. Like there's this one in Uplands Park, this big one in Central Meadow. I've done a painting of that one 5 times in the spring during the camas bloom. And it's kind of interesting to see how they've changed over the years.
Mm-hmm.
There was one 4 years ago or something like that I was working with, and it's a little bit bigger than the previous one, so it's about this big. I spent about 3 or 4 days on it, and just like even like the more you look, the more you see, right? So I'm like, okay, right, and then I decided, well, I'm just going to keep painting this until it starts getting dark, until it gets dark. Like, how long can I keep painting? Like, how long can I see? So I did, and then I pulled in the night sky, and then the moon showed up, and I put the moon in, and then a bat. But because I'd been around the painting for like 4 days, and I knew where everything was, I'd been all over this thing for 4 days. The bat came out, I was like, boom, boom, and there's the bat just like that. It's so neat. But they're like, they don't know gravity. They're pink and purple and green and blue all at the same time, right? And then the green leaves are impossible because it's impossible to paint those trees. It's great. I love it. It's really frustrating.
Well, I've found the use of the Gary Oak as a bit of a metaphor for the society that you're painting it, that it interferes with these things going all over the place, to be a very significant thing for tree, but it's very hard
Yeah.
to get it to work.
Well, who knows, right, if it works or not. But there was one that I did a couple of years ago, no, last year, where I painted it during the day. It's just a big one. It's like 6 feet by, 6 feet high by 4.5 feet wide. This canvas. And it was hot. It was during the heat wave last summer, and I was painting on the board. And there's deer walking past me and stuff like that. And it was actually in somebody's property, and they wanted me to do this. They asked me to paint this tree. And it just, like, I just kept working on it. It got more and more complex and more and more complex. And then I had it in the studio for several weeks. And it's just, it's lots of neat stuff, but as a painting, it's just not happening, right? So then I was like, well, let me go visit that tree again at one night. I think I had a couple of beers. I was like, I'll go see that painting, or go see that tree. It was only a few blocks away. And it was nighttime, and the moon was up. I was like, okay. And I went back to the studio, and I just went over with this wash, and just made it nighttime, and then started pulling stuff out. It's really great. And I was like,
Never really done it either.
yeah. Well, you know, it was the risk thing, right? The good paintings have something at stake, right? You gotta have, like, there's always gotta be a little bit of anxiety or something to make it interesting, I think. Otherwise, it's,
That's a great story. It's like you're bringing the plein air home. You went,
Yeah.
visited, and then brought it back.
And the client liked it. He said, oh, it reminds me of Nuit Americaine. You know what that is? It's this cinematic trick where they film something and then they, post-production, they turn it into nighttime.
The Westons, the old Westons used to do that.
Yeah. Yeah. I was like, okay, yeah, that's what I did.
What's the term again?
Nuit Americaine.
Very nice.
Yeah.
So Jeremy, do you want to talk at all about the commission you're working on now with the orchards? Because that seems like such an interesting.
Oh, yeah,
project.
it's pretty
So
interesting.
different for people to hear about how an artist makes their way in the world.
It's lucky, like it's really lucky, but this development that's going up in Kelowna, they wanted, they asked me to do this public art sculpture thing for this building. And the building is named after a cherry tree that was developed in Kelowna about 50, 60 years ago. So I was like, okay, I'm gonna make a sculpture of a cherry tree, but it's not gonna be a sculpture, it's gonna be a painting because I'm a painter. So how do I make a painting into a sculpture? So I thought about this column. So I'll make a painting, like a big panoramic painting, and get it reproduced and wrap this thing around this column. I thought, what do I do with the painting? How do I make the painting? So then I researched orchards and stuff like that, and I found this really lovely organic orchard. I found this other orchard, and they're like, sure, you can come up, but you have to work in between spraying. And I was like, and then I found this organic orchard, and they're like, yeah, come and stay. You can stay in the trailer in the orchard, and you can stay as long as you like. $30 a day for the use of the kitchen, bathroom, the trailer. You know, does anybody know how much accommodations are in Kelowna? It's like $300-400 a night. So here I am staying in this trailer in the middle of an orchard for $30 a night. So I went there in the spring and I painted the orchard in bloom with the lake and mountains in the distance. And then I went again this summer and I painted a cherry tree with full of fruit, which was really hard to paint because how do you paint thousands of leaves without painting thousands of leaves? And then how do you paint cherries without being a dummy, right? Like without because they're all different colors, right? You can go. So that was, and then like I was working on this painting, and then the farmer came by with his tractor and blew dust and grass all over the place. It was awesome. And then so I have these. And then I did some smaller portraits of these trees, and it's a really interesting orchard because some of the trees were planted by, like it's in the family for 100 years, and some of them are like 60, 70 years old, and they're broken and half rotten, but still producing fruit, and they're honoring these old living creatures that keep giving every year. I really like that. So I'm going back again in the autumn to paint them, because you know when the cherry trees in the autumn their leaves go all ochre and they sort of just droop vertically. So I'm looking forward to doing that, going back.
And the owner, he's buying the paintings?
Well, okay, yeah, so for the building, all the paintings that I'm making are going into the building.
Nice,
And then I'm going to
yeah.
use all the paintings to make this outdoor, well, what's going to be now is going to be about 14 feet by 2 feet by 4.5 feet by 4.5 feet clads around a column on the outside of the building. It's going to be either one of the paintings or a bunch of the paintings put together, or maybe, I'm not really sure yet. I still have a year and a half to decide how to do it, but it's just going to like this high resolution reproduction on a transparency wrapped around this light box so that it's illuminated, and it'll magnify the brush strokes so that when people walk by it, they'll see like this, but it'll be this big. So that should be fun. That's the idea.
So cast shadows too.
Yeah, around on the other parts of the building, yeah. So it's going to be like, I want it to be kind of like a big, not stained glass, but to feel kind of like that, and not to be super bright. So during the day it's going to be brighter, but at night I want it to go down in brightness, so it's not super bright. So it still feels like, because this isn't super bright, I want it to feel like looking at a painting. Yeah, it's pretty exciting.
Where's this, it's going on the bucket list.
These spaces with original art. And so that's part of the deal. There's going to be the final piece, but all the pieces that I make as research actually to go inside of it. Yeah, it's pretty fun.
I'm still back on, how did you paint those cherries?
Well, okay, so some of the cherries are like behind leaves,
Yeah.
right? Some of them are bright green. So it just basically I had to go back and work through them so that they're not cute.
Yeah, that's what I was wondering.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was just a little.
And the blossoms were the same thing. Even.
Yeah. Yeah.
And at one point I was like, I scraped it. And then I was like, oh my goodness, that works.
Well, thanks for.
Say more about the plum tree when you brought it to the.
Well, I just kept referring to it as like one of these paintings that I was like, so that painting there, the bridge, that's just like, you know, a painting of the bridge, and it's a bit of day and night stuff like that. But this is a plein air painting of this tree that used to be in my backyard when I had a yard, and I was interested in painting it as it changed, right? So then this was an example of how it almost falls apart. But what if I was brave enough to go a little bit further? Well, I'm not doing so. There you go.
So Jeremy, it feels like, and even describing your project in Kelowna, that you really approach art as like problem solving. Like you look at your subject and you find the problem that needs to be solved.
Every painting, right?
Yeah.
You go outside with this big blank canvas and
Yeah.
you're like, cow.
Yeah, what is the problem? And it's just interesting for people to know that that's like such a good approach. Like you're not just looking at the forest and saying, okay, I'm going to paint this. It's like, well, what is here that, how do I solve this problem of getting all this together on one canvas?
Yeah. There's one thing I've done to cheat a little bit, and
Well, don't tell us.
yeah, no, it's great.
Well, I want to know.
So I have a projector. So I'll go to the site that I'm going to make a painting of, and I'll take a picture of it. I did this once for Uplands Park. I wanted to do this Gary Oak, like all the trees, a whole bunch of trees. It's just this same size outside. So all these Gary Oaks with like camas bloom underneath and stuff like that. And I was really interested in that spot because beneath those oaks are the remnants of cairns. Because Uplands Park was a place where they cultivated camas and also where they buried their dead. And it's springtime, so I'm like, I gotta paint this. But it was so overwhelming, like how it's so complex, right? Like all these trees and their arms. So I took a photo, like took a bunch, and I was like, okay, that's it. And I projected it onto the canvas and just did a quick reference sketch, right? Okay, that tree goes here, it's kind of like this. And then I went out to the spot with the canvas with this really, there wasn't very much there, but it blocked everything into where it should be. And it was all wrong. Isn't that weird? And it's because I guess humans have two eyes and cameras only have one or something. I don't know what it is. Because this one tree that was in the distance, I was like, oh, okay. And when I did the projection, it was small. But then when I was out there looking at it, I was like, it's twice that size. So it was kind of cool to use that reference to see what was wrong.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I noticed you play with perspective very often.
What's that?
I noticed you play with perspective quite a bit in your work.
I don't mean to.
It's
Well,
just you're not
atmospheric
being-
perspective for sure. Like stuff in the distance comes forward. I like to do that. I love doing that. Yeah, bringing the distance right up front. Yeah, I like doing that.
Well, the human mind can control perspective all over the place,
Yeah,
and it's very useful with focusing things.
sure. And it's interesting to think of perspective as like just a construct, really.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not really how you see it. Kind of.
So did you just abandon the projection, what you had blocked in? Did you more?
Well,
or
no, I
less-
tweaked it. I was like, when I was outside, I was like, oh, well, no, this is twice as big and it's over here and all that kind of stuff. But I still, from time to time, I'll use the projector to help me try to, like, something that's, like, if I'm close to it, that's really like this, I'll use the projector to, but when I went out to the woods out in Fort Renfrew, I didn't do that. This painting, I didn't, like, you don't, it's better if I don't, even though I want to go take a picture, take it to the studio, and that'll help me. It never works out, and it's always better when I don't. The paintings that I did out in Kelowna, They weren't this big. They were 4 feet by 4.5 feet, and yeah, I didn't use any. I didn't cheat for those ones, but it's not really cheating.
No.
Anyways, yeah.
Any other questions?
Sarah.
I'm just thinking it really makes sense that the ones that happen outside have more energy. There's so many more factors at play, and they'd be so much more alive. And I think of the history of landscape painting and any of the Group of 7 paintings, all the sketches, all the things that were done, you know, out in Algonquin Park. I like a feel more of the land than the ones that are perfected in the studio.
Yeah.
So
Definitely,
it's great you're keeping this alive and working on breaking it down.
That's one of the things that I really struggle with, is that working in the studio, like working outside, it feels like I'm really doing, like I'm really having an interaction with the place, and I'm indexing it, right? There's all this, the changes and all that kind of stuff, and all the things. It's all going, everything's going in there, and it's this time, and so it really does feel like more like synesthetically, phenomenologically. And I feel like there's a mutual agency being served here between the place and the painter that's happening on the painting.
Yeah, there's all the sensation
All that
besides the
stuff.
paint and the canvas and the touch.
Yeah. And then the studio paintings, they might be more clever in some ways, but they don't have the same thing. So that's one of the things I keep struggling with, actually.
Jeremy, when you say that for your studio work that you'll go out and make a number of photographs
Yep.
and then have to put around, do you ever just do a sketch, a line sketch, where the energy from your hand captures something to augment what you get from the photographs?
Yeah, but it usually just gets buried. I think if I understand your meaning, like a gesture of like a brush stroke or something like that, they usually just get buried under more subsequent brush strokes.
Oh, yeah. I just,
Maybe I didn't understand the question.
well, I'm thinking that the approaching landscape, yes, photographs are useful as reference, but there has to be something that comes out of my body and it can sometimes just be a line sketch.
Oh, I see. Yeah.
So that you have a sense of energy and maybe even, I just wondered if you ever did just line sketches.
Oh, I used to. I don't do that as much anymore. It's kind of like the start. That's when I go outside. That's the start. And sometimes, people will come by and they'll see what I'm working outside. They'll see, oh wow, it looks great, it's done. And they're like, yeah, well, come back in 4 or 5 days.
But there is a lot of drawing in your work.
Yeah, they're pretty
Yes,
drawing.
Yeah. So, well, thanks, Jeremy.
Thanks a
That was
lot.
great. So the work is up until September 25th, and the school is open in the summer, Tuesday, Friday, 9:30 to 5. If you want to come and visit again, but they're worth spending a lot of time on. Yeah. Make sure you look at them 6 inches from the surface.